Okay, so I'm on page 21 of our Thanksgiving packet, and question numbers 43 through 54, we're going to use what's called the box method and the X method. Now, if you have another method that you guys like to use, then please use that method, but I'm just, as far as being consistent, I'm going to be going over these two methods, and then you can come to tutoring if you want to go over another one. So we're going to take notes on this method in our Unit 5 packet. So Unit 5 packet, page 6. So if you guys can turn to that page. Now, the question is, when are we going to use the box method versus when are we going to use just the X method? Because in problems 33 through 42, we could just use the X method. But in problems 43 through 54, we have to use both methods. The reason for that is all the numbers in, so for problem numbers 33 through 42, the coefficient in front of the squared term is always 1. See how there's no numbers on the outside of those variables? But here, 43 through 54, we have numbers in front of each one. So whenever you see a number, a coefficient other than 1, in front of that squared variable, that means that we should be using the box method. Okay, so let's go over the box method. Now, I'm now on page 6 of a packet. We already took notes on the top third. You guys should have that. So I'm going to draw a line here, and I'm going to be working on the bottom third here. Okay, so the box method, I'm going to label this box method. We're actually going to be using the box and the X method, but I want to give like the general notes here for the box method. So I have a 4-cube box like this, and we're going to have the first term in the upper left hand box, the last term in the lower right hand box, and then whatever number we get, add the X. Whatever number we get, add the X. Now that probably makes no sense to you, but I'm hoping that it will after we go through this example. Okay, so what we do is we take the greatest common factor of this column, and then we're going to take the greatest common factor of this column, and then we're going to take the greatest common factor of this row, and then the greatest common factor of this row. Okay, now let's actually do an example so this will make more sense. Let's set up the box for problem number 43. So I'm setting up my box. My first term, so the example that we're doing here is 7. I'm just going to change the A's to X's and just to be more generic. That's just a pet peeve of mine. So 7x squared minus 18x minus 40. Okay, so the first term here I know is 7x squared. So I'm going to have my first term, 7x squared, done with that box. This box says my last term, so my last term here is negative 40. So I put in my negative 40, done with that box. Now, these two boxes, I'm going to have to do the X method to figure out. So I'm going to do my X method. Now, before with the X method, we just took this number and put it directly here. And we put the B value directly below. But now that we have a number in front of the X squared, we have a coefficient other than 1, we have to take negative 40, negative 7, the two outside numbers come up, and that's the top of your X value. So negative 40 times 7, well, I know 7 times negative 4 is negative 28, and then I'm going to add a 0. This is going to be negative 28, or sorry, negative 280, and then my negative 18 I can bring down. So this is the top of my x, and this is the bottom of my x. So I'm trying to figure out two numbers that are gonna multiply to negative 280 and add to negative 18. Well, I'm going to first think of all the numbers that are going to multiply to negative 280. So I'm just going to do factors here. I know that it's going to be divisible by 10. So I have 10 and 28. Well, actually, right there, I know the difference between 10 and 28 is 18. So I'm going to think that this is probably one of my factors. So I got to figure out where to put the negative. Let's say I put the negative on the 10. So negative 10 times negative 28. Okay, that gives me negative 280. So I'm good to go here. So let's try this. If I have negative 10 plus 28, that gives me a positive 28. Oh, sorry. A positive 18. But I want a negative 18. So that means the negative must be on the bigger number. That makes sense. So my two numbers are going to be negative 28 and positive 10. Now when I have my two numbers, see how I have my number x, I take my two numbers and I add them to my two missing boxes here. But the common mistake that most students will forget, they'll put the negative 28 in the box and they'll forget to add x. You always, always, always have to add x. Don't forget that. Okay, my 10 is in my other box. Always, don't forget, add the x. Okay, we did the hard part. I think finding these two numbers is the hardest part. So now that we have the box, I have my first term, one of my numbers plus the x, one of my numbers plus the x, and then my last term. I'm going to do greatest common factors here. So I'm going to take this column, the greatest common factor of 10x and 7x squared. Well, I know they both have at least one x, so I'm going to have an x here, at least. And do I have any common factors between 7 and 10? Nope, I'm not going to have any common factors there. So my greatest common factor here is just x. Now let's do my other column. So I go to this column. So I'm talking about the greatest common factor between negative 40 and negative 28x. So I know that this one doesn't have an x, so that means there's no x's in common. So I'm thinking of a greatest common factor between negative 28 and negative 40. Well, I know that they're both even numbers, and I'm thinking, let's see, 7 times 4, so negative 4 would go in here, because 7 times negative 4 gives me negative 28, and negative 4 times 10, so I think that would be my greatest common factor here is a negative 4. Okay, now let's do my rows. So if I'm doing this row here, both have at least one x. So I'm going to have an x. Now let's talk about the numbers. So 7 and negative 28. Well, I know that actually 7 is a greatest common factor there. And because 7 can go into 28, because 7 times 4 is 28. But I'm thinking, wait, this one's positive, this one's negative. How do I know if this is going to be positive or negative or not? If one is positive and one is negative, what my advice to you is keep it positive and we can go back and check at the end. Okay, so now let's look at these two. So I'm looking at my greatest common factor for this row. So I don't have an x here, so I don't have an x in common, but I'm going to have a 10 in common. 10 is going to be my greatest common factor. And again, I have a positive and a negative. So is this going to be positive or negative? I don't know. Here's how you can check your positive and negatives. So here's the trick. And if you guys use the box method for multiplying, then you already know this. 7x times x gives us 7x squared. So that means we're good to go. Both of these should be positive because that's a 7x squared. Now let's check this. 7x times negative 4 gives us negative 28x. Okay, we're good to go. We did that right. That should be a negative. Now let's look at here. 10 times x, that gives me 10x. Okay, so this definitely should be a positive 10 because that's a positive 10x. Now let's double check our last box here. 10 times negative 4. Yep, that gives me negative 40. So I double checked my box, and that means my factors are these. So the answer here is x minus 4 times 7x plus 10. Now if you wanted to check your work, you can do your distribution arrows and you should get back to the beginning question. So going back to my other packet, I know this answer would be x minus 4 times 7x plus 10. Until you guys get used to these problems, I want to see your boxes and the x's, so you're going to have to do this on a separate sheet of paper and write your answers here. I want to see all of your work to get full credit for this packet. Okay?